This time I'd like to introduce our guest speaker. Neil Godsman is from Aberdeen, Scotland. He's direct descendant from William Davidson, apparently. He's traveled over here now, this is the second time. He came 3 years ago to try to trace his ancestry back. So now we've invited him again to come and to be our guest speaker. So this time I'd like to invite Neil to come forward.
Hello, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me? Oh, can you see me? Oh, well, too bad for all of you. But seriously, it is a great honor for me and privilege to be here tonight to make this toast to your society. I know how much good work your society has done over the years, and I hope it continues for a long time yet. Now, I hope you understand my broad Scottish accent. It's the Aberdeenshire Doric, we call it. It's a distinguished accent around the northeast of Scotland, very different, I should say, from other accents in other parts of Scotland, like in Glasgow or in Inverness and various. But everybody in my area talks my accent. And the name Godsman is not a common name anywhere. In fact, I checked the telephone directory just before I left, and there are only 16 addresses with Godsman in our telephone book in the northeast of Scotland. And there is no doubt that people first thoughts on hearing the name Godsman think we're connected with a man of God. Well, I can tell you there's nothing further from the truth. The name Godsman is derived from the word goudsman, and a goudsman is the man who led the horse with the plough. So I've been a farmer all my life, and all my forefathers, right back since the original John Godsman in 1550, we've been a farming community and farmers in the northeast of Scotland. Not only can I trace my family tree to that date, but from the same family tree I can also clearly trace my distant cousin John Godsman, who became the great William Davidson, and whose branch of the family moved a little further west of Aberdeenshire, the county of Banffshire, near the village of Fochabers. Now, I know some of you have been in Fochabers. From us, it's about halfway to Inverness, near the town of Elgin. My branch of the Godsman family have always known the proud story and how this distant relative, who immigrated to North America and became a great pioneer in Canada. But it's always been a mystery as to why he changed his name, family name of John Godsman to William Davidson, the great Scotsman of whom you are also proud of in this part of the world. Just 3 years ago, I travelled here to research the great man and my family connections to William Davidson, and I had to research and deliver a speech to an ancient Scottish club, the Club of Deer, who I am a member of. It is a very old club. It is the second oldest club in Scotland. There's an older one down in Edinburgh, but ours is the second oldest. And I gave a talk on William Davidson to our club, and they were most fascinated. I long wanted to undertake the journey to Canada to retrace the footsteps of my ancestor. And when I got here 3 years ago, I was greeted to Miramichi with so much kindness and friendship that not only did I find out how much my ancestors meant to you as Canadians, but we have now managed to build up a link between Scotland and Canada to keep up the good work of this amazing Scotsman. My paper this evening is entitled My Heart's in the Highlands. Familiar to many of you, I'm sure, as one of the most famous works by Robert Burns. It's long been a favourite poem or song of Scotsmen abroad or away from home, longing to be back to their native, favourite Highlands of Scotland. Throughout the turbulent and often troubled centuries of Scottish history, many of our forefathers have, for various reasons, decided to leave their homes and families and travel to many parts of the world and set up a new life. There are, of course, periods of Scottish history where many have no option but to leave life. Option to go, at times many who are forced out in their thousands. The Highland clearances of the 18th and 19th centuries, of the years which followed the Jacobite defeat at Culloden in April 1746, from which they estimated today that up to 500,000 Scots left to settle for new lives in far and distant parts of the world. Little wonder then you will find Frasers, MacDonalds or Sinklers in any part of the world today. She's going to do it with my specs on my size. Or places called Nova Scotia, New Scotland. And just think that 30 other places in the world have called their towns Aberdeen. I didn't look up, I'll lose a place. The descendants of Scottish immigrants in North America today alone is estimated at up to 20 million. We should, of course, never lose sight of the fact that there will be many willing Scots immigrants, those who chose to leave their shores of their own accord, no doubt to seek and venture fame and fortune, and so it is one of these great Scots that I dedicate my paper this evening. In the year 1740, at Cowford, the parish of Bellay near Spey near Fochabers, in Bamshire, a lad was born by the name of William Davidson. He was one of 3 children, William, Alexander, and Elizabeth, and the family were of a good standing in the parish. The childhood of William Davidson, of course, included the 1745 Jacobite rebellion and the very turbulent times which followed. It was in these often violent and unsettled years that Davidson grew up into manhood. He was certainly not associated in any way with the Jacobite rebellion, nor was any of his family. Now, William Davidson's family had the powerful support of the Duke of Gordon and leased salmon fisheries on the River Spey. Thousands of salmon were sent to London each season from the River Spey area, which were cured and salted or pickled in barrels of vinegar. Up to 130 men were employed on the Spey salmon fisheries, and many more were employed in the herring trade in the nearby coast. The Davidson family prospered greatly at this time, and young William Davidson learned in great detail the process of catching fish, curing them, and of the various trading markets for them around Britain and Europe. However, at the age of 24, for whatever reason, young William Davidson made up his mind to leave his homeland and establish a fishery in British North America in a part of Nova Scotia, which then included New Brunswick. There is no doubt the word should have been returned back to Scotland at that time, and with exciting opportunities in the New World, and for those willing to take a chance, it would have been the ultimate challenge in the already troubled 18th century. It was a huge adventure to an amazingly beautiful and unspoiled Miramichi, rich in natural resources, still cooling down from the long and harrowing 7 Years' War, but an area ready to be tamed by adventurers who were desperate to succeed. Reports from the area at that time indicated that the salmon numbers in the rivers were so great they could at times actually impede the shipping sailing on the rivers. Associated with William Davidson was a great friend called John Court, a native son of Aberdeenshire, and someone who, like Davidson, wanted to grasp the challenge to travel, explore, and maybe make his own fortune in this wonderful, new, unexplored part of the expanding British Empire. As the proposed undertakings for these two young men was a hazardous one, involving the investment of large sums of money, Davidson and Court, on their arrival in Nova Scotia, presented a memorial to the Governor and Council at Halifax. Eventually, on the 31st October 1765, the two Scotsmen from Banffshire and Aberdeenshire were successful in receiving a huge land grant of 100,000 acres with full fishing and timber rights on the Miramichi River in the province of Nova Scotia in return for settling the land. Davidson was required to clear and improve the land and establish one Protestant settler in every 50 acres. He was a hugely capable and adventurous man for one so young, and with his steady upbringing and fine family experience of fisheries and home, he made considerable progress in the first few years. After receiving the land grant, Davidson travelled down to New England to secure men and supplies, and eventually, in the spring of 1766, arrived in Miramichi with about 30 men. In the following years, more settlers and labourers were brought in from New England and from Britain, and particularly Scotland, to support the developing team. Davidson was soon shipping salt fish and furs to the West Indies and over the Atlantic to the European markets. As most of the fishery work ceased in the long freezing winter conditions in North America, Davidson quickly realized that to keep the men in all-year employment, other industries would need to be developed. Davidson soon saw that the fine standing of pine trees on the river had amazing potential. In 1773, he brought out to Nova Scotia a master shipbuilder, smithwrights, and other craftsmen from Britain, and began the construction of ships on the developing Miramichi River. So not only had William Davidson, at the age of 24, established a very successful salmon fishery from his arrival in 1766 in what was then a vast wilderness, but he then, in 1773, with the construction of his first ship, a schooner, named the Miramichi, Davidson had also built the first ever ship on the Miramichi and second only ever in New Brunswick. Then in 1775, he was contracted for the export of timber and mast to Britain. And this was the start of New Brunswick's amazing lumber industry. Furthermore, it had all been achieved in very, very difficult circumstances. It was thousands of miles away from his markets, hundreds of miles away from supplies, and right in the middle of a wilderness, plagued with Native Americans and Acadians, desperate to see them fail. And if that were not enough, it even got worse, more difficult for Davidson with the outbreak of the American Revolution. Between 1777 and 1783, during the war, Davidson and many of the settlers from Miramichi had no option but to move 150 miles southwest for a period to Majorville on the St. John's River, principally because of the raiding American privateers and the savage hostility of the native Indians. But to the enterprising William Davidson, it would take more than revolution and the native Indians to hold him back. So with his determined nature and strong will for success, he continued to expand his large and varied business empire. During his time at Majorville, he conducted lumbering operations on a large scale and became professional in the business of making ships' masts. Also at the age of 39, during his time at Majorville, Davidson married Sarah Nevers, and together William and Sarah had 3 sons and 3 daughters between 1779 and 1788. Well, 6 kids in 9 years, that goes to prove how hard a working Scotsman he was. Davidson, now happily married, in 1779 proposed a new scheme to deliver masts and yards, trimmed and ready for shipping to the mouth of the great St. John's River. With the success of the venture, Davidson soon had a large section of the Majorville population employed in timber and mast production. There is no doubt that the venture was another huge risk at the time, with so much unrest and fighting throughout the country. But luckily for Davidson, it not only turned out a great business success, but with the support of his staff and the growing local population, he was elected in 1783 as a willing and educated member of Sudbury in the Nova Scotia House of Assembly. In the same year, Davidson decided that due to huge competition on the St. John's River, he would return to Miramichi and pursue further his original land grant of 100,000 acres. By June of 1786, he had settled another 25 families on his land. He also created a new shipbuilding yard and began the construction of a large new sawmill. But after the province of New Brunswick was formed in 1784, the authorities were under great pressure to grant lands to royalists and disbanded soldiers who were flooding into the province to settle and find work. As Davidson was failing in his original land grant to bring enough settlers to this huge area, it was eventually decided in August 1785 to revoke his original grant. This is no doubt that this was a very difficult and unsettled time for Davidson, because at the same time as his land and business were being reviewed by the authorities, his long-standing business partner and friend, John Court, who travelled from Scotland, suddenly died. Eventually, Davidson was issued with a new land grant. It was greatly reduced in size, but it was still a considerable grant of 14,500 acres from the original area, and to his delight, it had much less stipulations than it had at first. Davidson went on after this to continue to settle as many new families as he could in the area, and many of them were still coming from Scotland. Around the same time, he also became one of the first justices of the peace for Northumberland County, and in New Brunswick first elections, Davidson became county representative in the provincial assembly. As ever, He continued to expand his business empire and made several major contracts with shipping companies, particularly in Greenock, Scotland, and in Halifax, Nova Scotia. This has included a major contract to supply masts and yards to the expanding British Navy. He also continued his market for fish around the world, and by 1789 he had 3 large sawmills in full operation on the Miramichi for all the lumber he could produce. However, in February 1790, when all seemed to be well and the business was thriving, William Davidson was travelling upriver from his business in snowshoes and was caught in a severe storm. He nearly froze to death and sought shelter in a haystack for a couple of days until the worst of the storm passed. He never fully recovered from the extreme cold, and for 4 months later, on the 17th of June, William Davidson died, aged only 50. I often wonder what more this great man might have achieved had he lived some years longer. But, like many a good story, there is a twist to this tale, because William Davidson, this man of great vision and energy, who founded the first English-speaking settlement in North New Brunswick, who developed the fishing industry far beyond that of the earlier Acadians, and was principal founder of the vast lumber industry on the Miramichi and St. John River. And a great politician, was actually born John Godsman, a Godsman the same as myself, and only changed his name to William Davidson from his mother's family when he emigrated to Nova Scotia in 1765, probably because of this family's strong Catholic connections at home. The Godsman family from Spain near Fochabers are distant relations of my own, and we're all related back to a James Godsman, who was a tenant farmer, Mains of Burness, near Ellen, dating back to the year 1550. And for enemies any doubts, I have a family tree in my pocket here just to prove the case. I have for long been fascinated and proud of this story of my distant cousin. And in search of this paper, I travelled to Miramichi in New Brunswick to see for myself the land my ancestors had tamed. There is only one final part to the story, and that no one has ever discovered, and that is why this young man, John Godsman, changed his name to William Davidson. Frankly, I think he made the change because of emphasis on the word God in Godsman. In the 1760 was a difficult time in Scotland for Catholics or Jacobite supporters. There is no doubt that this ambitious young man wanted to start a new life and wished no sense of religion or politics to go with him. So in conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, let me go back to the origin theme that great Scotsmen who have travelled the world and set up new communities, founded amazing businesses, and had set an example to others, are indeed some of our finest sons, and I am immensely proud to be related to one of them. And as I finish my speech, it is apt to remember that at the same time as William Davidson was making his new life in far-off Canada, Robert Burns was back home in Scotland, writing his many masterpieces, including My Heart is in the Highlands, which he wrote in 1789, the year before William Davidson died in 1790. Yes, it is indeed a small world we live in, and thank you all very much for listening to my story. Thank you.
Well, certainly this has been a very special occasion to have our cousin, Neil Godsman, come here all the way from the homeland of William Davidson to tell us this wonderful story of great success, this wonderful story of the man who created the seed that grew into the great Miramichi Scottish community and, in fact, grew into the great province of New Brunswick. 3 years ago, I had received a call from Phyllis Mossman that there was some stranger over in Fredericton who was here trying to trace his roots. And I wondered, well, what's he doing over in Fredericton? Well, she said he's related to William Davidson. So she drove over and got him, and he had Robert Lovey with him to provide the musical accompaniment to him. And so we met this Neil Godsman. And Glenn Dixon, of course, and Bill and Sally Donald, and Manfred Wasson, and Paul Stewart, and the other members of the executive were fascinated by someone who was actually from Scotland, who had come back to the Miramichi to make the connection. So shortly after that, we passed a motion, Euro Society, that we try to develop links with Fochabers in Scotland to try to strengthen these ties between the Miramichi Scots and the town that was the homeland of William Davidson. So we did do that, and there's been more and more. Last year, this Fochabers fiddlers came over here last summer from William Davidson's hometown to perform for us for 10 days. Manfred Wasson led a group to Fochabers on August the 31st to strengthen again our ties, and now we have another trip being planned for next year. Anyone who wants to go, it's a great opportunity. But most importantly of all, it's been a great honor to know Neil, to know his family, to know that not only are there Scotsmen in Miramichi, but we have relatives, we have friends, we have family back in Fochabers, Scotland. And we want to keep that bond growing and growing. So Neil, when you go back home, tell them what you've discovered here in Miramichi, and tell them that we're going to get closer and closer till the people in Fochabers, Scotland are tired of the sight of us. That being said, we have a little gift for you. I want you to come up and accept this, if you wouldn't mind. One thing that's unique about the Miramichi, it's very, very, very proud of our salmon heritage, and the Spey River, which is the main river that runs through Fochabers, is the most important salmon river in the British Isles. And of course, we have the shipbuilding tradition here, and at the mouth of the Spey River, there's a tradition of building sailing ships there as well. So much in common. The only thing that's different is that in Fochabers and in the Spey River, there are about 60 Scotch distilleries. We don't have any here, at least that are legal. They tell me there's a pretty good one back in the back end of Maple Glen, but no one wants to talk about it. So Neil, accept this on behalf of the Highland Society here in Miramichi. We're going to get you to tear it open.
Tear it open.
Tear it open. You want me to tear it open?
I've only a small suitcase, John.
Now, Paul Stewart picked this out. It's well packed.
See.
And it says, to Neil Godsman, in appreciation, the Miramichi Highland Society 2015. And it's some incredible salmon flies that have been the most successful in catching salmon on the Miramichi.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you very much, everybody. I don't know who told John that I'm a bit of a fly man, but I don't fish. But I'll find some use for it, John. It'll be nice. I'll hang it in my office wall. And I'll have to be careful because many of my friends are fishermen. And I'll have to keep the door locked that they don't nick it. But thanks again very much. And very kind of you to invite me over here. Thanks.
Neil, I just want to remind you that these flies are so effective that you just have to wave them over the water and the fish will jump into the boat. Hey?
Those flies were tied by Bud Kitchen. I think some of you people around here, he's well known worldwide. He's done fishing now, but he's an old golf buddy of mine. So I was talking about getting something for him, and then Bud said, well, I can maybe have a suggestion, because he's a great fly tire. So at this time, I'd like to ask Neil to come up. I'd like to present him with an honorary William Davidson medal in appreciation for all he's done and coming all the way from Scotland to take part in our St. Andrew's banquet. So I'd like to present this Highland Society of New Brunswick at Miramichi. This certifies that Neil Godsman has been awarded honorary membership in the Order of William Davidson, given this St. Andrew's Day, November the 30th, 2015.
And it's great because it's signed by the first person here I met, Phyllis Mossman. So thanks.
Yes.
So, not only will I remember Miramichi, but I'll remember Phyllis Mossman as well.
So Neil, now I'm going to present you with your medal.
Me again?
You again. Yeah. It's engraved on the back of the medal, Neil Godsman, honorary member, 2015. I don't do a very good job of pinning people because Dorothy Creighton can vouch for that, but I'm going to try.
I think the ladies made maybe a better job, than you.
Yes, I know. Where is that? I don't know.
You can't even open it.
No. There we go.
Stick it
Now,
in.
Neil. Where do you want it?
Oh, it's not put up here. Oh.
Did I get you? I'm just going to put it on there. Can't get it. Look, it's bent.
Oh, yeah.
What do you got?
He's bent. Put it back in the box. I'll do it tomorrow.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes.
You'll maybe break
He's going to put it back in the box and we'll pin him tomorrow.
I better do that before he breaks it, I think.
Yes. There.
Thanks
There you
very
go.
much.
Yes, yes, yes.